Welcome to the Folktale Project. This is Dan Scholz. Today we have the second part of Genovefa, a story that is, well, it's sad so far, isn't it? We've seen Genovefa accused wrongly of infidelity after refusing numerous attempts at causing that infidelity by Golo. And we've seen her husband, Siegfried, sentence her and her child to death. But, thankfully, the servants who were sent to carry out the sentence don't actually kill her. They only release her and leave her in the woods alone with a newborn. It's not really the best situation, but it certainly is better than being murdered. And thus we pick up with part 2 of Genovefa. Genovefa's tired feet wandered through the unknown forest, her child crying with hunger. She prayed fervently to heaven in her despair, and tears were sent to relieve the dull pain in her heart, after which she felt more composed, and her child was soon sweetly slumbering. To her great astonishment, she perceived a cavern near her, where she could take shelter, and, as if God wished to show that he had heard her prayer, a white doe came towards the cavern, rubbing herself caressingly against the abandoned woman. Willingly the gentle animal allowed the little child to suckle it. The next day the doe came back again, and Genovefa thanked God from the depths of her heart. She found roots, berries, and plants to support herself, and every day the tame doe came back to her, and at last remained always with her. Days, weeks, and months passed. Her unfaltering faith had rendered her agony less. In time she learned to forgive her husband who had condemned her unjustly, and she even pardoned him who had taken such bitter revenge on her. Her lovely cheeks had become thinner, but the forest winds had breathed a soft red into them, and the child, who had no cares nor gnawing pain in its heart, grew into a beautiful little boy. At the castle on the Rhine, sorrow was a constant guest since this terrible event had happened. Siegfried's burning anger had sunk into sorrow, and often when he was wandering restlessly through the rooms so rich in sweet memories where now a deserted stillness reigned, the agony awoke again in his heart. He now repented of his hastiness, and a voice whispered in his ear that he had been too severe in his cruel punishment, that he had condemned too quickly, and that he should have considered what he could have done to mitigate her punishment. When these haunting voices pursued him, he would hurry away from the castle and its loneliness, not being able to bear the torments of his thoughts. Then, to forget his trouble, he would follow the chase with the yelping hounds, but he only seldom succeeded in dulling his misery. Everywhere he seemed to see the pale face of a woman looking imploringly at him. The state of his master's soul had not escaped Golo, and this crafty man cringed the more to the sorrowful count, feigning to care for his welfare. A starving person accepts even the bread which a beggar man offers, and Siegfried, supposing his steward wished to compensate him for his loss, accepted willingly every proof of devotion, and recompensed him with his favor, at the same time hating the man in his inmost soul who had rendered him such a terrible service. One day, the count rode out to the chase, accompanied by only a few retainers, one of whom was Golo. Siegfried pressed deeper than was his custom into the forest. A milk-white doe sprang up before him, and, sportsmanlike, he chased this singular animal through the bushes, hoping to shoot it. His spear had just grazed it when it disappeared suddenly into a cavern. A woman, whose ragged garments scarcely covered her nakedness, leading a little boy by the hand, suddenly came out of the opening in the rock, and the doe, seeking protection, rubbed herself against her. She looked at the hunter, but her limbs trembled so that she could scarcely stand. Only her large, sad eyes gazed wistfully at him. A stifled cry, half triumphant, half a groan, escaped from her lips, and she threw herself at the count's feet. From the voice which for long months had only moved in earnest prayer or in low, sweet words to the child, now flowed solemn protestations of her innocence. Her words burned like fire into the soul of the Count, and drawing her to his breast he kissed her tears, and then sank at her feet, imploring her pardon. He pressed his little boy to his heart, overcome with gratitude and happiness, and wept with joy, calling him by 1,000 affectionate names. Then, at the sound of his bugle horn, his retinue hastened towards him, Golo among them. "Do you know these two?" thundered out the Count to the latter, tearing him from the throng and conducting him to Genovefa. The wretch, as if struck by a club, broke down, and, clasping his master's knees, he confessed his wickedness and begged for mercy. Siegfried thrust him contemptuously from him, refusing sternly, in spite of the Countess's intercession, to pardon his crime. Golo was bound and led away, and a disgraceful death was his reward. Now became a great time of happiness for Siegfried and his saint-like wife, and they lived in undisturbed peace with their little son. In gratitude to heaven, Siegfried caused a church to be built on the spot where the white doe had appeared to him first. The Countess often made a pilgrimage to this house of God, to thank him who had caused her tears to be turned to joy. Then a day came when her corpse was carried into the forest, and was buried in the church. Even now in Lach, the wanderer is shown the church and the tombstone, also the cavern where she suffered so much. Thus the name of Saint Genovefa will last to all time. And that is the story of Genovefa. Tale of, well, loss and love and repentance, eventually, from Siegfried for his harsh and cruel actions toward his saint-like wife and child. This is Dan Scholz for the Folktale Project. Don't forget that you can subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, Overcast, anywhere you like to get your podcasts. You can follow us on Twitter at Folktale Project. You can find us on Auto Radio, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, Spotify, anywhere you like to listen. You can always head over to folktaleproject.com, where you'll find a new story waiting for you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. As always, thank you so much for listening.